you're all battened down, gotten, I hope you're all battened down the hatches and gotten out your umbrellas because we're gonna have another big storm that looks like it's gonna last all week, which is kind of long. Anyway, welcome. And welcome to Richard Engle, who's our speaker, who's worked for 9 years at Redwood Coast Energy Authority, where he's the Director of Power Resources, overseeing the administration of the Community Choice Energy Program, power procurement, and customer account management. Previously, he worked for the Schatz Energy Research Center, where he developed hydrogen fuel cells and other advanced energy technologies, as well as developing clean energy programs at several Northern California local governments. He earned his BS in Environmental Resources Engineering at HSU, and he's worked for local government energy programs in San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Sonoma County. So welcome, Richard. It's all yours.
Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the introduction, and it's nice to see everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to initiate a screen share here. Is that working? Jane, can you confirm?
It's not visible yet. Now it is. There it is.
Great. Okay, let's take things away. All right. Well, happy November, everyone. My topic today is to talk about energy storage for Humboldt County as an essential ingredient in the local clean energy transition. Just to set expectations, my role at our CEA is working on power procurement and customer-facing functions related to our community choice energy program. I'm not directly involved in the customer programs, such as our rebates and incentives that we offer for energy efficiency. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to take them down and can get back to people, or can arrange to pass information back through Jane and the OLLI staff. So let's jump into it. First, I just want to introduce a couple of questions about why we're having this conversation. Why are we talking about energy storage, and why is it happening now? And I'll say that today's presentation is an adapted version of a presentation that I gave live in person at Arcata's D Street Community Center back in July. I know a lot of people that were interested were not able to make it to that for one reason or another. So this is a sort of an updated version of that presentation with a little bit of material added to it. And speaking of questions, I'm happy to take questions along the way. I will ask that Jane can let me know if there are questions coming in either through the chat or people raising their hands. And I can pause at any point in the presentation to try and answer those. So back to the questions on the screen here. We're talking about energy storage just because there's widespread interest in it as an enabling technology that can work alongside renewable energy for transitioning away from the fossil fuels and nuclear power that we've been reliant on over the past century plus. We're also talking about energy storage because there was an energy storage project that caught on fire back at the beginning of this year at Moss Landing down on California's central coast, and that got some national attention because it was the largest accident of its type involving energy storage to date. So that naturally raised questions with people about doing large-scale energy storage projects. And that led to some recent community discussions on the benefits and risks of energy storage. And that was what led us to hold the workshop that we did back in July, and also led to this becoming an OLLI topic for today. So in today's presentation, I want to talk about the organization I work for, Redwood Coast Energy Authority. And I'll also talk about Community Choice Energy, which is the program that I specifically was hired to develop and work on here at our CEA. We'll define what energy storage is, talk about its importance in transitioning to clean energy. We'll talk about energy storage in California and specifically in Humboldt County. We'll get into some of the safety and environmental concerns around battery systems and the codes and standards that have been adopted to address safety and environmental issues. And we'll talk a little bit about what RCEA and California are doing to promote safe use of energy storage. So RCEA, Redwood Coast Energy Authority, is a local government joint powers authority. JPAs are sort of government entities that span across other government entities. The Humboldt Waste Management Authority and the Humboldt Transit Authority are other examples of JPAs here in Humboldt. Ours was established back in 2003 to implement sustainable energy initiatives to reduce energy demand, increase energy efficiency, and to advance the use of clean, efficient, and renewable resources. Like I say, we span across different governments. Since founding, we've been serving the County of Humboldt, all 7 of the incorporated cities, and the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. In recent years, we've been very happy to expand our membership to include 2 of the local tribal organizations, the Blue Lake Rancheria and the Yurok Tribe. So like I say, I first came to RCEA to work on community choice energy. I started at RCEA in 2016, and the following year we launched this program. Through community choice energy, RCEA provides electricity for 92% of the electric accounts in Humboldt County. The reason we're not serving 100%, well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is that some large institutions like Cal Poly Humboldt and some large businesses have what's called direct access. So they're able to get low-priced electricity through special arrangements they've had through state of California going back several years. And another is that our program, by its nature, as enabled by state law, is an opt-out program, meaning that when we first set up the program, everybody's electric accounts got automatically enrolled in our program. However, people did have the opportunity to opt out if they preferred to stick with PG&E as their electric generation provider. We've had some people opt out, but I consider the program very successful in that we're still having 92% of electric accounts choosing to stay with our service. We operate our program in collaboration with PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company. They're necessarily still the ones that own the poles and wires, so they're the ones that deliver the electricity. But upstream of that, we're the ones who are now procuring the electricity that goes into the poles and wires to get to your home or business. So that's our role with the Community Choice Energy Program. Starting this year, we are providing a mix of resources that are either renewable or carbon-free to all of our customers. So we've gradually been cleaning up our energy mix from the launch of our program, and this year is the first year that we have freed our power content of having any so-called brown power, meaning everything is either from a renewable or a carbon-free source. So let's transition to today's topic, energy storage. Energy storage devices can store electricity from a generation source like a wind or solar power system so that that can be used later when the generation is not available. There are a few different reasons why you would install and use energy storage. One is just that solar isn't available all day. You know, it's some days are cloudy like we're having today, and then of course there's nighttime when there's no sun at all. The wind isn't always blowing. These are the most affordable forms of renewable generation, but they're intermittent. And because of that intermittency, energy storage can be matched with them to make sure that the electricity that's generated from solar or wind resources is available at all times of day. Another thing you can do with energy storage is use it to provide local backup power when there is a grid power outage. This can be as simple as individual houses having their own, battery system like a Tesla Powerwall or something similar to that, that stores energy and can dispatch that energy when the grid is not working. Or you can have centralized energy storage that is set up as a microgrid, as RCA did with the airport microgrid, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, as a means of keeping some area within the grid powered up when the main grid is not running. Another thing that energy storage can do is it can ensure good quality power. Electricity at your home typically needs to be supplied at 120 volts or 240 if you have high voltage appliances like an electric dryer or something. And it needs to be at a frequency of 60 hertz. If it gets away from those values, you can start having damage to appliances and the whole grid can be at risk. Batteries can be dispatched onto the grid strategically to maintain that power quality, keeping the voltage and frequency stable. Another thing batteries can do is prevent power outages from happening in the first place by providing extra capacity on the grid during times of peak demand. And I will show some graphs of how that has worked specifically in California in recent times. And then there's a business opportunity with energy storage too, which we call arbitrage, just the idea of buy low, sell high, meaning that electric power costs different prices at different times of day. And if you can use the cheaper electricity to charge batteries and then discharge that energy back onto the grid when power prices are higher, there's potential to make money doing that if you're a wholesale market participant or even a behind the meter, as we call it, participant in the grid, having energy storage at your home or business. So how does storage keep the grid balanced? We have electricity being generated at different times of day, and we also have electricity consumption happening at different times of day. This is tricky for grid operators because in the absence of storage, the grid operator needs to exactly match the amount of generation going into the grid with how much is being consumed. And that has to be, in every instant, you have grid operators that are ramping generation up or down all the time, or even reaching out to energy consumers through demand response programs to get them to reduce their demand at particular times. All of this is aimed at ensuring that the amount of input to the grid coming from generators is exactly equal to the amount of load that customers are taking out of the grid. Now, if we introduce energy storage, that creates a lot more flexibility because now, instead of having to worry about the generation exactly matching the consumption all of the time, you have this storage that's sort of like a savings bank that you can put excess electricity into that's not needed in that moment, put it into batteries, and then that energy can be drawn on at other times when the consumption might be in excess of what generation is available. So here's a graph that shows an example, and think of this as a single utility customer. The horizontal axis on this graph shows the time of day over a single day. And the vertical axis shows how many kilowatt hours are going in or out of the utility meter. So in the middle of the day, the yellow part of the graph represents solar. Let's say this is a customer who has on-site solar on their rooftop. So in the middle of the day, you've got that solar resource, but that does not match the load, which is shown by that thick blue line that represents how much electricity the customer needs at each time of day. So you've got, let's say, a big load in the morning when everybody's getting up and getting ready to go off to work or school. The sun hasn't come up and started shining yet, but you need some electricity. If you have a battery on site as well as the solar panels, then you can be drawing on energy that was stored overnight in the batteries to get through that load in the morning. Later on in the day, the load goes down. Maybe everybody is off at work or school, and maybe you've just got some things like the refrigerator cycling on and off to keep food cold and some minor background loads like that. But you've got lots of solar energy coming in. So the solar panels can charge the batteries that you have on site. And then later in the day, after the sun goes down, that same battery can be discharged to power the evening loads. Now, suppose the solar wasn't really enough to meet all of your daily electricity needs. Well, you've also got the connection to the grid, and you can use energy from the grid to charge the battery. And the time of day that you would want to do that is when power is cheapest. So depending what utility rate you're on, you can look at what times of day the energy is least expensive and use that grid power to fill up your batteries to get through the load that you know is coming the next morning. Okay, so here's a more of a real world example. And this is, instead of looking at a single household, this is looking at the entire grid of the state or most of the state. These data come from the California Independent System Operator. That is the entity that manages the power markets in California and manages the grid, dispatching orders to generators to ramp up or ramp down their output. The CAISO, as it's known, serves most of California. There are a few areas of the state that are outside of the CAISO footprint, but you can think of this as most of the electricity in California in this graph. Looking at the vertical axis, that shows we're talking about megawatts now. So this is power at a much larger scale, and you can see the numbers are big too. When the numbers are above zero on the y-axis, that's power that's going into the grid from generators. And the negative numbers on the lower part of the axis are power coming off of the grid. So you can see the orange line is that solar, and just like in the previous slide, we can see that there's a big hump in the middle of the day when solar is being produced. It's not a nice smooth bell curve this time, it's squiggly. That represents the intermittency of solar. When there's spells of cloudy weather, the production goes down a little bit. There's a dark blue, almost black squiggly line there, a little bit lower on the graph around the 5,000 megawatt level, and that is wind power. So those are two renewable resources that are putting power into the grid. In the case of the wind, it's putting power in all day and all night, but it drops down a bit in the middle of the day at the same time when the solar is at the maximum. And then you can see the batteries um, uh, are being charged in the middle of the day. So the green line that represents batteries, and this is all of the state's batteries that are connected to the CAISO, these are being charged in the middle of the day. That's why the line is below zero, because these are pulling power from the grid that's being produced mostly by solar resources. It's charging up those batteries. And then after sunset, over on the right-hand side of the graph, you can see that there's a big discharge of the batteries that takes place to meet loads after the sun is no longer available in the evening. I can pause here and see if are we getting any questions yet, Jane?
Not yet.
Okay, well, I'm just going to take a quick drink of water and then I'll carry on.
And feel free to ask them because it's interesting. I thought we used to get electricity from wood plants, wood pellet plants and things like that. So
We do.
do we still?
Yes, and I don't mean for this graph to be a complete representation of all the resources. This is just selectively showing solar, wind, and batteries, but there are lots of other generation sources on the grid. There's gas-fired plants, there's nuclear, one nuclear plant still operating in California, the Diablo Canyon plant. And yes, there are what we call biomass plants, which are running off of wood products, sometimes agricultural waste, sometimes methane from wastewater plants, things like that. And RCEA does get about 20% of our electricity from bioenergy.
There's been quite an argument over that, hasn't there? Because of the
Yeah,
emissions.
there has been. So the state of California has categories of renewable energy that include solar, wind, small hydro, geothermal, and bioenergy. And we procure, a pretty diverse mix of those resources. Ever since we launched our program, we've been getting some of the power from biomass because there was at the time that we started our program, two operating biomass plants here in Humboldt County, and they were looking for a buyer for their power. Because it's considered renewable by the state of California, we've included that in our mix along with the solar and wind and small hydropower. I'm seeing a question from Julie Fulkerson.
Yes. Do you know if there's any development from the methane from the landfill that the county used to manage years ago? And my understanding was there would be methane building up and it would be considerable. Do you know, has anything been developed around that?
Back in my days working at the Schatz Energy Center, we looked at that with the county. This was the Cummings Road landfill.
Yes.
That's yeah, off of Myrtle Avenue,
Yeah.
outside of Eureka. And that landfill closed long enough ago that by the time that we got involved and did a study on it, the amount of methane being given off had already ramped down significantly and was considered, and this was more than 15 years ago when we looked into it. But at that time, the amount of landfill gas, methane, had dropped off enough that it no longer appeared financially feasible to procure that or to develop a generation project there. There are plenty of other landfills elsewhere in California that are still active and still, adding more material and will continue to produce methane for years or decades to come. In fact, we have actually spoken with companies with landfills elsewhere in the state that generate power and are potentially interested in selling to RCEA. We haven't actually made any deals for that so far, but we're potentially interested in that because it's also considered renewable by the state.
What is the life expectancy of solar batteries? John Clark asks.
So batteries typically will operate at a pretty constant output level for about 10 years, and then you start to see their output fall off. However, we do get companies that offer contracts for 15 or even 20 years for battery systems. And the way that they make good on those contracts is by augmenting the batteries once they start to diminish their output. So you might have a battery system that has pretty solid output for the first 10 years. And then as the output starts to ramp down over the next 5 to 10 years, the company will continue to operate those batteries and install a few extra batteries just so that the output of the whole system remains constant. Or if the battery performance is really significantly gone down, they might replace the batteries entirely. Shall I carry on?
Yes.
Okay. So this was not part of what I included in the presentation back in July, but I just got this data off of the CAISO website a few days ago, and I thought this was a really good sort of way to answer the question is, are batteries saving the grid? Are they really playing an important role in keeping the grid operating stably? So what we have here is a graph of each of the 24 hours of the day for the statewide load back in May of this year. So this was like a typical day in May 2025. You see a set of wavy lines kind of across the middle of the graph. There's a solid line and then dashed lines above and below it. Those represent different estimates of the electric power load or the amount needed from the grid that particular day. And so you can just kind of think of, the solid line in the middle as being a good estimate of what the electric load was for that day. The colored bars that are stacked on top of each other represent the mix of different resources that were available and how much of those resources were available at each hour of the day over the 24 hours of that day in May. So you can see that most of the bars remain roughly the same size, and the two that really change are in the middle of the day, you've got an orange segment, and that, as in the previous graphs we looked at, represents that big amount of solar energy that's generated during the middle of the day. Now, over on the right-hand side of the graph, you see that as the solar disappears, there's a kind of violet colored segment of the bars up near the top, and that represents batteries that have been charged earlier in the day and are now discharging their power to the grid. And what you see here is that during the month of May, everything was pretty much peachy keen, that the amount of generating resources in each hour of the day was way above what was needed to meet customer load that day. So May was kind of coasting. May is a time of year when you're generating pretty good solar in the middle of the day, but you're not yet having really hot weather where everybody's turning on their air conditioning and straining the grid. Now, let's jump ahead to August of this year. Different story here. And what you see is the load did get quite high in the late afternoon and early evening hours. And if you look at that superimposed over what resources were available to the grid, and if you look at that, the solid wavy black line, that's kind of the best estimate of how much demand there actually was on the grid during that August day, you can see that the batteries were indeed making the difference between having enough power on the grid and not having enough. So I'll talk in a minute about how much we've increased battery storage capacity in California over the last few years. But here in 2025, we now have enough batteries online that they constitute a very important and very visible segment of all the resources that can be dispatched to the grid. And from about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., those batteries were cranking, and you can see that if the batteries hadn't been there, we probably would have been in trouble and had to take some serious measures, up to and including potentially rolling outages to keep the grid overall from failing on a day like that. So batteries really are doing something important for the grid in California now.
I have a question. When do all those batteries get installed? When did that start?
I actually have a slide on that will show you how much batteries have increased over the last few years. So maybe we'll just hold that question and I can
Sure.
show you a graph that gets at that in just a couple of minutes. So first, let's talk about what kinds of rechargeable batteries are available. And I say rechargeable here because we're not talking about the alkaline batteries, that we use in, TV remotes or whatever, that you use them once and then they're toast and you have to dispose of them, hopefully through the proper channels. We are not supposed to throw any kind of batteries in the garbage. So there are drop-off locations for those batteries. But let's stick to rechargeable batteries here. So again, I'm talking mainly about these larger utility scale systems here, but these same battery chemistries are being used in small consumer type appliances as well. So first, there's conventional batteries, the ones that have been around for years and years and are still used in for the starting batteries in people's cars, like assuming we're still talking about gasoline powered cars here that just have a battery under the hood for starting the engine and running the appliances in the car. Those are lead acid batteries. More recently, we had nickel-based batteries like nickel metal hydride. You've probably used those before as little AA or AAA batteries that are rechargeable. But they're also used in much larger scale systems and devices. And then there's lithium ion batteries. These are very common now, all the way from tiny consumer grade batteries for, miniature little appliances on up through these really big utility scale, multi-megawatt storage systems. And within lithium ion, that is a broad category. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a list of a whole bunch of different kinds of lithium ion batteries. I'll highlight two of them. One of them is nickel manganese cobalt oxide. That's kind of an earlier form of lithium ion battery that was used in a lot of the earlier utility scale, larger energy storage projects, including the Moss Landing project in Monterey County that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. More recently, we've seen a really big shift away from the nickel manganese cobalt oxide batteries, or NMC, and towards the lithium iron phosphate batteries, or LFP. Those are now the predominant choice in storage projects. And I can say Redwood Coast Energy Authority, all of the offers that we've gotten for energy storage projects in the last couple of years have just been these lithium iron phosphate. That really seems to be what the industry is focused on right now. There are a few other categories of batteries that I've marked here as emerging or specialized batteries. There's solid state batteries that have no liquid electrolyte in them, sodium ion, flow batteries, and zinc-based batteries. These are not the kinds of batteries that are being offered to RCEA and commercial projects nowadays, but potentially they could be. And some of them have advantages either in longevity or potentially even safer technologies than what's being deployed today. Now, there's other kinds of energy storage that aren't batteries at all. And this is a really interesting topic area. It fascinates me. There are gravity-based energy storage systems. Pumped hydro is one of them. There are several of these projects around the country. One large one in the Sierra Nevada is called the Helms Pumped Storage Project, which is operated by PG&E. This involves having two different reservoirs at different elevations, and the water is allowed to run downhill to generate power during times of day when energy is costly. And then when you have low-cost energy during off-peak hours, you can pump the water uphill from the lower reservoir to the upper one. So you can just pump the water back and forth and back and forth, and it essentially operates like a battery. You can also do this with solid weights. There is at least one company I know of out there that is developing projects where they just have basically giant cranes that lift weights up using inexpensive electricity. And then during other times of day when the electricity costs are higher, they lower the weights and run generators with that. There's hydrogen using electrolyzers and fuel cells. I spent years working on this as an energy storage technology when I was at the Schatz Energy Center at Cal Poly Humboldt. There's compressed air systems. These are often taking advantage of underground caverns or depleted spaces underground that maybe were formerly oil wells or gas wells. So you inject compressed air underground and then you let it come zipping back out and spin turbines with that. There's ultra capacitors, which are solid state devices that can just store electrical energy. There's thermal storage, where you're just heating something up and then using that heat to drive a turbine later in the day. And there's heavy flywheels that you can spin up and then use those to run generators. So there's a lot of different technologies out there. Other than the pumped hydro, I would say the batteries are what's being used at large scale nowadays. So to answer a few more questions on this, how much energy storage does California policy call for? We have a goal that the state has set that by 2045, that there would be 52,000 total megawatts of energy storage in place. That's shown in the right-hand graph. And as of October of last year, we had made it 25% of the way to having that much storage online in California. The left-hand graph shows how that breaks down, that the great majority of it, the green section, is utility scale storage. So these are projects that are built, by utilities or by private developers to provide, many megawatts of storage in a single location that can be dispatched to the grid. The orange and blue bars represent either at commercial sites or homes, and this is what we call behind the meter systems. So these are systems that are located on site where there's a customer using electricity and they have their own energy storage system there. If it's a residential, it might be a Tesla Powerwall or something similar to that. If it's a commercial system, it might be the power packs, like the ones that we have installed at our microgrid at the Humboldt County Airport. So you can see that to date, the great majority of energy storage has been these centralized larger scale systems that's shown in green here.
You have two questions. Can propane generators be used to charge the batteries? And do you recommend generators for power outages versus batteries?
Um, Propane can be used. It is a non-renewable fuel like natural gas. And given that RCEA's goal is to decarbonize the grid, we're not actively promoting that as using propane generators to charge batteries because ultimately you're still putting carbon emissions into the air with that approach. So we like to encourage people to couple batteries with renewable generation like rooftop solar. Can you repeat the second question, please?
The second question is, are there toxicity issues for large battery storage properties in communities? That is Arcadia, Eureka, or other local cities?
I am going to talk about the environmental and safety issues associated with batteries a little bit later in this presentation, so I will touch on that. The short answer is yes, there are hazardous materials involved, but we'll talk about what's being done to address that.
And the second part of the first question was, do you recommend generators for power outages versus batteries?
Um, Again, we are trying to decarbonize the grid, so we see batteries as superior, but we recognize also that it's more expensive to get through outages using batteries in terms of how much you have to spend up front on the batteries. So you can take one approach would be having your own home solar system and batteries, and assuming you're getting enough sunshine during an outage, you can keep the batteries charged up potentially indefinitely if you're being careful with your energy use and not over discharging the batteries when the sun isn't shining. And compare that with running a generator where you're putting either propane or diesel or gasoline into the generator. All of those are resulting in carbon emissions, which we prefer not to see. But having said that, you can certainly buy a small gas-powered generator for less than you would spend on a battery and solar system. So we recognize there are some use cases where it just makes more sense economically to use the generator. In the case of like our airport microgrid, there were already diesel generators on site to keep the airport loads powered up during outages. When we put in our microgrid, we put the batteries basically in front of the diesel generators, meaning the diesel generators are now relegated to kind of deep backup. So if we get in a situation where there's just more load than the batteries can handle, then potentially yes, the diesel generators get turned on, but that's considered kind of a last resort.
Richard,
Yes.
question. I've heard that the Chinese have been making major gains in battery technologies that has enabled them to make cheaper electric cars because they'll go further. And is this just rumor or is there anything solid to it?
I haven't been following it closely, but I would imagine just like they've been making breakthroughs on other technologies by like AI and getting out ahead of the technology array that we have available in the West. I wouldn't be surprised to know it. I know that they're aggressively marketing their electric vehicles in other countries besides the US. I was in Colombia over the summer and saw that Chinese electric vehicles were really being widely offered for sale and purchased and used there. So I don't know if their batteries are more efficient than ones available in the US, but I will say a large part of the batteries that have been installed to date in California have been manufactured in China. I think we're seeing a big change in that now with the tariffs in place. So we might see, I think what's hoped for with the tariffs is to see a ramp up in more manufacturing of batteries in the US. But if you look at country of origin for a lot of the batteries that have made it onto the market in California for these, utility scale systems to date. A very large fraction of them coming from China. So with that in mind, perhaps we're already benefiting from efficiency gains that the Chinese manufacturers have been making. Okay, now to get back to a question I heard earlier, I think this came from you, Jane. You were asking, like, when did battery storage come online? How recent has this been? It's been quite recent. This is one from the governor's office showing just the ramping up of battery deployment. So back in 2019, this was kind of when battery commercialization started really taking off. And you can see that, it was doubling or more than doubling, year over year in some instances, or just making really big gains. And it may look like it's leveled off, but if you look at the 2025 bar, that was only for the first month of 2025. And even there was a significant gain of several hundred additional megawatts of generation capacity in California. So this gives you a sense of, how big these projects are. And I will say, like the largest battery system that RCEA has entered into contract for to date is a 92 megawatt system. And if you put that against even 2019, that 92 megawatt system, which is, uh, enough to coupled with well, I'll say that when it's discharging at 92 megawatts, that is enough electricity for all of our customers under normal conditions. We usually have a little bit under 100 megawatts of customer load. So even that 92 megawatts is a pretty tiny fraction of 771 megawatts back in 2019, an infinitesimal fraction of the nearly 16,000 megawatts that were online as of early this year.
Who's actually building these systems? Is it PG&E or is it a private company that we're leasing the storage capacity from?
It's typically private companies. I can explain how RCEA does our procurement when it comes to solar or wind or battery storage or other technologies. We will issue a solicitation. We do this typically once or twice a year. We send the solicitation out to a very large list that we have of companies that develop these projects. And then we get responses and we evaluate those. We're actually in the midst of one of those evaluation cycles right now for a solicitation that just closed last month. And then we, look at the ones that look like kind of the best combination of price and low risk of technology and likely to get their permits, likely to be able to interconnect their project to the grid. And then we enter into contracts with these private developers. They build the project, they own and operate it, and they're just charging us for the electricity that's generated from it, or electricity that's stored in the system in the case of batteries. So we pay a price for that. And it's these private developers that are building and operating the systems. The one notable exception to that for our CEA so far has been the airport microgrid, which we actually got grant funding from the state, as well as some financing we did with a loan through the U.S. Department of Agriculture to build that system. And that one is actually owned and operated by us.
Is it competitive? Are the prices going up? Are they reliable? How does that work?
They are the systems are reliable. I can say we've had a really good reliability experience with battery storage systems that we've entered into to date. As far as cost, prices for generation and storage were trending downward for a long time. We've started to see a concerning reversal of that with system prices going back up. Part of that has just been, I think, driven by kind of supply and demand economics in the market. But very recently, with the current administration in Washington, D.C., they are imposing tariffs on imported materials, and they're also ending some very important tax benefits that developers of these projects could get. So we are starting to see the prices for these projects trending back upward, which is challenging for us, especially at a time when so many people are concerned about affordability of their electric bills. We don't want to have to start charging more for the clean power that we deliver.
Is that the reason or the rationale behind why our electricity prices are going up?
I would say no. I would say what's happening with electricity prices, if you look at the data, is that to date, the actual generation of power has been pretty flat. If it's increased, it's only been pretty minor increases in the last few years. Where we've seen really skyrocketing costs has been on the transmission and distribution side. And what's going on there has been, we had these wildfires here in California in the last few years, and a lot of those were found to be caused by electric transmission and distribution infrastructure failing and igniting fires. And the state's response to this was to authorize the utility companies to make very large investments in what they call grid hardening, which meant, doing more vegetation clearing around power lines, putting in insulation on lines, putting lines underground in some places. This has been a very, very expensive operation, and that's been reflected in the Public Utilities Commission authorizing the utilities to increase their transmission and distribution rates to recover those costs. And that's really been the lion's share of power cost increases in California.
Shouldn't have some of those costs been maintained or directed toward the investors instead of toward, I thought infrastructure was supposed to be based, a cost to the investors, the shareholders.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That is what you expect to see. But like I say, the Public Utilities Commission has authorized rate increases to address this. So it's not being borne entirely by the shareholders.
Is it being borne by the shareholders at all? Or are we getting
I
sucked?
don't have a breakdown on that. I believe some of it is been picked up by shareholders, but it's not something that I've really tracked very closely. I can ask our regulatory policy manager about that one.
Okay, I mean, that's an interesting issue because the Public Utility Commission tends to be obviously operating in in the interest of the power companies. Are incentives for homeowners to install battery backups disappearing with the present federal administration? That's at the federal level.
I think what we're seeing is I'm not aware of incentive programs that are being canceled as far as like direct incentives, like rebates to customers. However, there are two important tax credits that are being sunsetted. One is the investment tax credit, which is based on how much a system costs to install, and the other is the production tax credit, which is a tax credit that's tied to how much energy a system actually generates. And those are both being phased out pretty quickly. I am getting a somewhat alarming message from my computer saying the battery is running low, which I didn't expect because when I started this presentation, it told me I had 6 hours of battery life. I'm going to run and grab a power supply to plug in my computer, so I need to pause the presentation. My apologies. I'll be back online in just a minute or so.
That's fine. While you're doing that, I'll tell everybody about the November 10th brown bag lunch, which will be about identifying and preventing elder abuse. And that will focus on both the practical and legal aspects of elder abuse, including information on common scams. And boy, are there a lot of them. Tips for spotting and preventing elder abuse, probably, and scams, and legal tools and remedies available to victims of elder abuse. And they had the Senior Resource Center had a whole conference on that in the summer, and it was excellent conference. I don't know whether they've actually published anything from that or whether they recorded it and made it available, but you might check with the Senior Resource Center. But basically, the two people that are addressing that were presenting at that conference, and it was excellent. So there you go. Yeah, I know you were getting, your voice was disappearing, Richard.
My apologies. I am having a little bit of difficulty here.
It's okay.
Hang on for just another minute.
Not a problem.
I know when we got our battery, we did end up having the recommendation that the one from China was the latest and greatest. So I'll be interested in seeing what happens if anything goes wrong with it. And I don't think there was much discussion about how you added to it if it started wearing out after 10 years. So since I'm 80, that may be a non-issue. Hard to know. Julie, I don't know. Because it's not on the computer. It's his computer that's having the problem, not Zoom, probably. Who knows?
Yeah, technology always likes to turn on us right at the most inopportune time, huh?
Well, it could have been worse. Could have happened way early on. I think it's fascinating how much private enterprise is working on increasing the availability of battery backup. Clearly they saw an opportunity. Because with the increase in solar and all the solar panels and so forth, they needed to be able to take care of the ups and downs of it, because there was a lot of problem associated with having a blackout at one point when that capability wasn't available. Are you plugged in now, Richard? Maybe.
I'm still getting the low battery signal, which is weird because I do have power
Maybe you
plugged
lost
in.
electrical power, Richard.
Yeah.
But the storms haven't started yet.
Okay. I think my solution is going to be going back to my own desk, which is not ideal, but I think I need to do that to finish this
Okay.
presentation. So
Okay.
please bear with me for just a moment.
Interest, whoever owner is that I don't know. It says curious, how many of the attendees have solar panels? I do. I don't know. What about Julie? Do you or Lou? Anybody want to raise your hands if you have solar panels?
We've got, let's see, a couple
don't.
people in the
Julie says no.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Oh wow, we have quite a few people in the comments saying that they do have solar. That's wonderful. Oh, look at that.
Well, I'll tell you, it does pay off. I mean, you need to live long enough to to make it pay off, but because it's a sizable investment.
Mm-hmm.
But now what's interesting about how it works when they went to the third level, if you didn't get into levels 1 and 2, they do require you to install batteries. It goes along with the package. And then what happens is they ask you how many you want to reserve. In other words, what percentage of your storage do you want to reserve for when the power goes out so that you have power? Otherwise, what they're doing is drawing down those batteries as part of their backup supply. So they give you the option of how much you want to keep for yourself. And ours is set at 50%. But it's an interesting way. But basically, they're having the homeowners provide their own backup battery supply. That's why they went to this new technology to the level 3, if nobody ever made that clear. it's an interesting way to avoid having to set up their own batteries. And now that they're doing is leasing it from companies, private companies. And they don't have a whole lot of control over what happens with that pricing. I mean, they can negotiate every year, but if there's not a lot of competition, that's a problem. But and I don't know how many people have installed the level 3 systems where their batteries become backup supply for PG&E. I have no idea. Nobody's ever come up with those statistics.
Jane,
But
are you able to hear me now?
yep, we can hear you. Are you back on
Okay.
board?
I'm back on board. I'm maybe having a little trouble though with the screen share. Tell me if you're going to be able to see. Is that showing up for you?
No, not yet.
It looks like it's popped up if you can get it into presentation mode, I think.
Okay.
There you go, but it's not
How about,
normal size. Okay,
uh-oh.
that's better. Now,
Okay. Are you seeing the slide that I was on with the batteries at different
yes,
deployment levels?
but
You're
you
just in
need to be,
presenter mode, so if you go full screen, it'll work.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to stop the share again for a sec and
Yeah, thank you all for your patience with this, but
yeah,
that's
apologies.
technology
it's
for you.
totally fine.
Mhm. We learn patience at this age, or none at all.
How about now?
No, there
Yep,
you go.
there you go.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to apologize to my coworkers who have to be in earshot of me now because I was in a private room, but I was having trouble with the power supply there. So I think I've solved that problem and now created another one by making everybody listen to me.
They'll survive.
Okay, I think so. Okay. Now my next problem is how do I advance to the next? Oh, okay. Okay, great. I think we're fully back in business. Okay, so the next thing I was going to talk about was just deployment of energy storage locally in Humboldt County. And what we have there is it's quite different from what we saw at the state level. Here in Humboldt County, only about 8% as of the end of 2024 had been deployed at the utility level, and that was almost entirely accounted for by the airport microgrid that I've talked about a little bit. So about 8% of the mix locally was utility scale. I believe some of that was also, well, no, actually, I guess I would say that was the only utility scale one because there was another pre-existing microgrid at the Blue Lake Rancheria, but that was a behind the meter microgrid serving basically a single utility customer. So that probably shows up in the 60% commercial. These were all lithium ion battery systems. I will say that if we run these breakdowns again as of this year, that 8% will go up substantially because we now have another system that I'll talk about in a few minutes. That's the Foster Avenue Solar and Storage Project. And then on the right-hand side, you can just see geographically how the storage deployment breaks down. And it's more or less what you would expect because most of the storage projects are being installed outside of city limits and unincorporated areas of the county. So that shows up as other and McKinleyville. And the rest of it is in the incorporated cities with the lion's share of that in Eureka, as you would expect.
So other is the county.
Yeah, it's county other, well, McKinleyville is unincorporated, and that's
I
the
know,
one
but
specific
yeah.
town showing up here. So other is just everywhere that's outside of city limits and not McKinleyville.
Yeah.
So as far as utility scale projects we're involved in, the Redwood Coast Airport microgrid came online in late 2021 and has a little over 2 megawatts of battery storage coupled with a similar amount of solar capacity. if you look at these pictures, you really can get a sense of how much less footprint the storage takes up compared to the solar. So what we have there is, several acres of solar, approximately 9 or 10 acres of solar panels, and then just, a few hundred square feet of storage in batteries. And then we're excited this year to see, just in the last couple of months, the Foster Solar Plus Storage Project had its ribbon cutting in October when that system came online. And that one is similar battery capacity, a little bit larger than the airport one, but a lot more solar. So 7 megawatts of solar. Solar in these types of arrays takes up 4 to 5 acres for each megawatt. So this was like 27 acres, I believe, of solar panels. And again, just a very small area covered by batteries.
Is that somewhere in the county?
Yes, I'm sorry for not mentioning the location. It's just outside of Arcata city limits in the Arcata Bottoms on land that is
Oh, the bulb farm.
owned by what used to be the bulb farm. Yes. So if you're on Foster Avenue, that's like a east-west street in Arcata, and you just follow that out west of town, you'll pass by this system and you can see a lot of it from the road. And we're continuing to procure more energy storage. Our board just last month approved a contract for another solar plus storage project that'll be outside of Blue Lake near the old fish hatchery. This is a project that already got approved and permitted by the county as a solar only project a few years ago. And the developer wound up having some difficulties with the interconnection to PG&E, costing much more than had originally been agreed to in an interconnection contract with PG&E. So the developer had to pause the project, and then the permit was still in place, but they had a contract with us for that, ended up mutually agreeing to cancel that contract. But now the project is back with energy storage added to it. We also are in negotiations for an energy storage project that would be installed at the former Fairhaven biomass plant site on the Samoa Peninsula. Remains to be seen where that one ends up, but we're hoping to have another storage project built out there before long.
Who built and paid for the Foster project?
It's a company called
Yes.
It's a company called Renewable America. They're based down in the Silicon Valley area and in the Bay Area. And they hired local workers to do the actual installation, but they manage the project themselves. What happens with some of these projects is they will be developed and built by one company, and then they specialize in building these, but they're not really, it's not in their business plan to own and operate them long term, so they transfer the project to a different owner for the operation phase. So that's what's happening with that project. And then we have, aside from those utility scale projects, we have some distributed projects that RCA has supported. For a while, we had a community grid program that enrolled 54 residential and commercial customers who put in about 3/4 of a megawatt of megawatt hour of energy storage. The idea here was a virtual power plant that could be centrally dispatched for improving grid resilience and reliability. And so that program eventually ceased operating because the developer just stopped operating in California and was having trouble just succeeding on a business level with their projects in California. But the good news was that the customers still got their systems installed and get to keep them. They're just not being operated in that virtual power plant mode anymore, which the idea there was to just be able to, kind of bulk dispatch all of these systems together according to what was needed to, keep the grid stable.
Do you know why it failed?
I think locally they just didn't get as many customers showing up and signing up as they had expected when they entered into contract with us. More largely across California, I'm not really sure why that particular company stopped operating in California. They may have had similar problems in other communities. We've also been involved in putting in solar and battery systems at remote fire stations. We helped get grant money to pay for these systems. And we also provide tech support, providing feasibility studies, and technical assistance and funding, getting secured through, again, grants for tribal senior housing and other public facilities. So now I'll turn to the subject of safety and environmental concerns around batteries. Because these batteries store a lot of energy in a small place, there are fire risks if the batteries get damaged. Understanding and managing those risks is really critical to having these projects be safe and successful. And there are codes and standards that have been adopted to kind of determine how that gets done. So California kind of led the pack on battery adoption at large scale in order to help meet our clean energy goals. Because of that, some of those systems the early ones were designed and permitted before there was a whole framework for codes and standards for battery storage, because it was still an emerging technology. In 2020, the National Fire Protection Association, the same folks that do the National Electric Code, issued a standard called 855 that gets updated every 3 years going forward. There's also the Underwriters Laboratories, UL, the ones that have the little seal that you see on consumer electric products. They have a standard called 9540 that requires burn testing of battery technologies before they can be deployed. So they have to demonstrate that even if a fire starts, that it won't propagate across a whole system. And the good news with the battery chemistries in use is that these lithium iron phosphate chemistries that are now really coming to dominate the market for new projects are proving themselves to be much more stable than the earlier batteries like nickel, manganese, cobalt.
John Clark asked, how efficient are these battery systems? How much energy is lost through transmission?
Yeah, we call it round trip efficiency, which is if you take the amount of electricity that you get out of one of these systems and divide it by how much electricity you put into the system, that's the round trip efficiency. And for battery systems, that typically is between like mid 80s to low 90s% efficient. So meaning for every 100 kilowatt hours that you put into these batteries, you're getting like 85 to maybe 92, 93 kilowatt hours back.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
It is pretty good. And if you compare it, remember I had a slide talking about other storage technologies like pumped storage and compressed air and things like that, and hydrogen. And those are usually much lower efficiency, which is one of the main reasons that they haven't really, competed with batteries in the marketplace, because they're, typically like in the 60s something percent to low 80% efficiency out of those other technologies for the most part. So batteries are just winning on efficiency. I think the question asked also about how much gets lost in transmission, and that's separate. Any electricity that travels over the grid from a generator in a remote location to your loads at your home, there's some energy that gets lost in transmission. That's pretty small. That's, in the low single digits, usually maybe 3 to 4% of electricity that gets lost transmitting it on the grid. So we have to take that into account when we're deciding how much wholesale electricity to buy, because we know we have to meet the retail demand of our customers. And so if you look at our power procurement, you'll see a wholesale amount that we buy, which is a few percent higher than the retail electricity that we're selling to our customers to account for those transmission losses.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're running kind of low on time. I'm not going to get much more into. I won't go through all the bullets on this slide. I'll just say that that the codes and standards have I think really been successful at ensuring that battery systems are safer now than the ones that were installed a few years ago. The photo on the right shows what's pretty typical for battery storage systems, and this is very similar looking to like the Foster and airport microgrid projects we have locally, where the systems are installed in modular containers and they have separation distance between them, and they're not inside of something else. They're outdoors. That's considered safe design. Um, More than 94% of all the batteries in place now came online 2021 or later. You'll remember that graph I showed you that showed how much acceleration there's been in battery storage. And that's good news because it means they came online after the fire protection standard 855. There are pollutants that can be given off when lithium-ion batteries burn. You can get carbon monoxide, hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen chloride, hydrogen cyanide, particulates, metals, hydrofluoric acid. You know, if there's a fire, that's environmental contamination that has to be managed, and emergency responders need to be trained in how to address that. Here's a real world example of when that happened. The Moss Landing fire happened back in January down in Monterey County. You see those smokestacks there. The reason those are there because this was a repurposed facility. It had formerly been a natural gas fired power plant, and they had closed down the power plant and used the site and its grid interconnection infrastructure to put in energy storage there. 50,000 batteries burned. They had to evacuate 1,200 residents in the vicinity of the plant. It was the biggest battery fire that's happened in the country so far. And the fallout from that was some local governments have considered or even adopted moratoriums on energy storage in their communities. I would argue that's an overreaction to the situation. Moss Landing was a non-standard design. You can see from this photo that the system was built inside of a building that was formerly part of that gas power plant. I think this was considered a good idea at the time that it happened, but you don't see batteries being installed in this way now. There also wasn't as much spacing between the modules and cells in these batteries as is required under these codes and standards that are in place today. So these are some of the factors that made for high risk with this system. There was testing and monitoring done to see if there was contamination of soil, air, or water. Monterey County created a public GIS dashboard to make that information transparent and available to the public. Data came from the EPA, Department of Toxic Substances Control, County Environmental Health. There was a grassroots community group that is called Never Again Moss Landing that got involved in that and has participated in that the GIS dashboard and in advocating for transparency and disclosure. I've provided a link to the website here for people that want to look at that more and learn about how they monitored for environmental hazards from that incident.
Janina asked whether our fire personnel are trained to handle this.
Yes, actually, that's a very good question. And because we own and operate the airport microgrid, RCEA and the Schatz Center, who we worked with on that project, organized trainings of first responders. And since we're also deploying smaller systems at like public agencies, we're making sure that the first responders do know how to deal with these fire hazards. We have a separate team at RCEA, our infrastructure planning team, and they were the ones who took the lead on those safety trainings and making sure those were scheduled and delivered. The state has established a state battery storage safety collaborative, and they worked with CAL FIRE, who put on a symposium on battery safety for local officials. I put the YouTube link to that into this slide. It's a day-long workshop, so it's 7 hours of material, but you can view that, or if you look at the smaller link down at the bottom of this slide, there's just information on the collaborative. You can also find it just by Googling California State Battery Storage Safety Collaborative. As far as RCEA, our energy storage solicitation that we issued earlier this year included safety as one of the evaluation criteria that we used in selecting projects. Our contracts for energy storage call for safety plans and emergency response plans in those contracts. And most importantly, the authorities having jurisdiction, which means the county or the cities where these projects get built, require that all of those safety codes and standards that I talked about in the earlier slides are used in deploying these projects. I wanted to wrap up, and I'm happy to take further questions from you all, but I have some questions for you. And these are questions that we used in July when we had the energy storage workshop here in Arcata. And one of those was just, how would you like to see energy storage used in Humboldt County? Another was, what concerns do you have about energy storage? And last, how do you think those concerns should be addressed during planning or implementation of projects? And I'm happy to take any input folks have on those and add that to the information that we took out of our workshop that we're going to use in planning our future involvement in energy storage.
I have a quick question. Do we have, with those projects you are contracting with, are any of them in the county?
The ones that we're contracting with.
Yes.
So yes, yeah, the ones that like I'll just go back real quickly to these are both local slides, or both on county land. So these both went through county permitting process. The airport one, because it was at an airport, also had to go through Federal Aviation Administration review and approval. And then both of the projects that I mentioned on this slide are also on unincorporated county lands outside of city limits.
Thank you.
Sure.
And you're getting thank yous from individuals.
All right. So I think we're down to our last few minutes here, but I'm happy to take more questions, or if folks have any input they want to provide on the questions I've put up on the slide here, I'm happy to respond to those or just note them and pass them on to the rest of our team.
Are you encouraging neighborhoods to consider having their own systems, storage systems for neighborhoods or specific sub-communities? Is anybody working on that?
Yeah, that gets into microgrids. I would say our main involvement in that for communities or neighborhoods has been the Tribal Energy Resilience and Sovereignty Project. This is a project that RCEA has partnered with the Yurok tribe, the Hoopa Valley tribe, and the Blue Lake Rancheria. The good news was we got a very substantial federal grant of more than $80 million for this project during the last presidential administration. The bad news is under the new administration, that grant appears to be getting canceled. We don't have final notification on that yet, but they have publicly said that they're canceling that grant funding. That does not mean the project is canceled. The tribes are very interested to carry on with this project. What the project would do is it would build a set of what we're calling nested microgrids, meaning these would be interlinked microgrids having battery energy storage and generation of different types that could include solar, small hydro, and biomass power. And these would be serving those tribal areas. And the intent is to improve the reliability of the grid in those areas with having storage in kind of neighborhood scale installations. And it's really critical because the electric circuit that serves the Hoopa and Yurok tribal areas in Humboldt County is one of the very least reliable electric circuits in the entire PG&E system. So that really needs to be addressed.
Fire risk reduction tips for home-based installations. Do you guys have those?
I don't have like a ready to go handout on that, but I can certainly point people to resources if they would like to just see tips for safe energy projects.
Should we suggest that they contact you to ask about that, or?
Sure, yes. And
Okay.
I will go to my last slide, which has my email address on it. And I'm happy to happy to take emails from people if they want to follow up with any questions.
Yeah. And then, let's see, is there a concern for safety from vandals?
I would say it's potentially a concern, but we certainly take that into account. We have very high security, particularly because the airport system is on airport land. We installed the system within the secure perimeter of the airport, so it's got like a high, like I think 12-foot high barbed wire topped fence, like chain link fence with barbed wire on the top that, just like the rest of the airport perimeter has to keep people off the runways and such. So that's a very secure system, and then within it, it's got, locking cabinets, it's got video monitoring, there's kind of the whole 9 yards of protection against, vandalism or other, unfriendly interventions. The Foster project, also is a secure fenced area with video monitoring. So, I consider these projects to be, as safe as they reasonably can be from vandalism.
Johan Holt. All right. Is that all? Any other questions, anybody? Thank you. You've got lots and lots of, let's see, you've got one issue. My installer put in both a heat sensor and a surge suppressor for my battery backup. Is that unusual? Hello?
I don't think that's unusual. In fact, I think those are probably both called for by code. I'm not an expert on the minutia of the codes, but I would expect those to both be included.
All right. Well, if there are any other issues, you've got lots of applause from everybody, lots of great comments. Thank you so much. Super informative. And let's see, just many, many thank yous. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And if you have any questions, feel free to direct them to Richard. And Richard, thank you so much. And we can close this shop down.
Thank you,
Okay.
Richard.
Thank you all.
Well,
Have
that
a
was a
great
great
week,
job.
everyone.
Everybody
All right.
really appreciated it.
Sorry for the technical hangups.
Hey,
Bye-bye
not
all.
a problem.
Not a problem. All right. Have
Take
a
care,
great week,
everybody.
everyone.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
don't drown in the little excessive rain we're going to get.
Yeah, it should be quite a show.
I'm sure.
Thanks for